Welcome everybody that's joining us tonight. Today's session is going to be hosted with Michael Kilpatrick from Growing Farmers. This is a sponsored series masterclass event from FarmBridge and Harris Seeds, where we truly wanted to dive into all the different stages that your farm might care about. From starting up a farm, what does that look like? And Michael will dive deep into that, helping you think through what it's like to build a farm, grow a farm, who your customer base is, and those type of things. The following week will be about digital marketing and online sales, social media marketing with Local Line. The following week will be around thoughtful writing content. So now that you have the tools, how do you write an effective newsletter, a blog, a social media post? And so that'll be with an expert in the writing industry. And then the last part will be a tutorial on lean farming and how you can implement principles in addition to coaching and those type of things. So that's what the series will look like. There's a Q&A session for this series. At the end of each one, we'll allow 15 minutes. Please chat in any questions that you have throughout, and Michael and I will do our best to get to them before we run out of time. But without further ado, I want to introduce Michael Kilpatrick. Most of you know Michael from all the excellent work that he does in the farming space. He's been doing it for years. He's a farmer himself. Too many tremendous things to say about him, but if you haven't checked out his website or his thriving podcast, I would encourage you to do that, because there's a lot of great insights out there, not only from Michael and his team, but also from all the awesome farmers across the nation that are sharing their value and their insights. So again, chat in the questions, but welcome.
Hey, thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely, man. Well, thanks for putting the time together to dive into these things. I know a lot of our listeners might be familiar with some of the work that you do here, but if anything, a refresher, brand new. It's all excellent content for people that are truly thinking about starting and or pivoting and growing into a different farm or whatever farm space they're in. So tell us a little bit about yourself and kick us off.
Yeah, so why don't I actually, because I got a slide that talks a little bit about that, what I'm up to now. So why don't we just dive into the slides a little bit? So let me figure out how to get these presented. And go ahead and share my screen here. All right, what do you see?
You got it, it's up there.
All right, okay, so this is the slide, the top slide here, the 4 critical steps of starting and growing your farm business in 2021. Again, we're gonna go more of a high level, because again, I really love to chat back and forth, to do questions and answers. So we're gonna spend more of that time kind of like discussing it, because I feel like, you know, it's one thing for me to just spew information out there, but it's a whole nother thing for us to have a conversation about it and kind of unpack it a little bit. So we'll try to do that a little bit as we go as well. So a little bit about me: farmer and educator, farm coach, podcaster, and highly sought after speaker, owner and founder of Kilpatrick Family Farm, which was a multiple 6-figure year-round organic vegetable farm in upstate New York. And I'm an expert on profitable, sustainable agriculture and 4-season farming. And so that's a picture of me and my family. That actually was 2019. So by background, upstate New York, again, farming up there. We had the farm, we had 20 employees, about 14 acres of intensive vegetables, managed about 50 acres of cropland, and then about 150 of pasture. And again, I love teaching farmers. So it's awesome to be able to work with farmers all around the world and see the light bulb moments. This actually is a client, Amber, on the West Coast. And Amber came to me when they took one of our classes, and they're like, oh my gosh, this completely opened our eyes that you can actually make money farming, because we were always taught that you couldn't. We were taught that it was something you're going to do on the side, that you were going to do as a part-time thing. And so working with Amber and helping her, literally every single year she texts us and she's like, we don't like work one-on-one anymore, because she's kind of beyond what she needs from us. But she texts us and says, hey, my income went up another X number of dollars or X percent. So it's great to see her do that. So 2020, spring of 2020, we found an 8-acre farm after searching for 3 years. And this is the farm we live on now, called the Farm on Central. And you can see it's actually on a road called Central Avenue. We're flanked by 2 train tracks. So you can see the train tracks here, the train tracks there, and it's a little community of about 5,000 people. So it's a relatively large urban farm, about 8 acres inside the city limits, which make dealing with the city all sorts of fun. And my eye starts to twitch just thinking about it. So it's right now, it's a blank slate, but starting here, as soon as the ground thaws, we'll be putting up greenhouses and tunnels and finishing out the wash and pack shed, and do a whole bunch of profit-scaping and aspect around that. And I thought I had a slide in here that kind of showed what we're working on now, because we've already got, we're doing mushroom cultivation on the property, as well as growing vegetables and other things as well. So again, we're doing a lot of different things on the property already, and just super excited for you bringing on the team and really growing this operation to the next level. So what we're going to talk about tonight is farming. Obviously, we're going to talk about the starting of farms aspect now, but farming is incredibly rewarding. I don't know anyone else who farms that doesn't love going out and just playing in the dirt and, seeing the crops grow out of the ground, and, see the harvest coming at the end of the year. That was my favorite part. We did a lot of large scale vegetable production. So we had harvesters, and we would have, the carrots coming off the harvester into the bulk bins. And then we would have, the trucks being full going to the markets and then coming back empty. So that was the incredible rewarding part of growing vegetables and farming, is just seeing that bountiful harvest and then seeing the customers just love it and love to eat the food. And the problem with it being so incredibly rewarding is so many of us do it and we're underpaid. It's almost like we do it, this kind of weird concept of like we're a public service. And so we kind of just do it. We're just helping folks out by feeding them. But if every single company ran that way, and again, as a small local farmers, we're a very small fraction of the food industry, then they would not make money and they would be responsible to their shareholders. And you as a farmer, your main shareholder is yourself. So you need to be responsible to basically, instead of pouring money in the farm every single year, to be making a profit. You deserve a profit, you earn a profit, you're working way too hard to not make a profit. Yes. So the problem is that only 5% of farmers make it 5 years or more. And this is incredibly troubling to me. And actually, this is something that I really started to think about when we shut our Kilpatrick family farm down in upstate New York. So a little bit about my history is I farmed up there for a decade, from about 2003 to 2013, 14, 15. 15 is when we finally shut it down. We had, in like 2003, 2004, we were really just ramping up. So 2005 was when we really started production farm with, multiple trucks, and actually opened a business and all that kind of stuff. So we ran that to 2015. And then we did is we leased out our farm to 2 of our great employees. I mean, they were fabulous guys. They were managers for us. They got a lot done. They were key to our farm producing. But problem is, within 6 or 8 months of them taking our farm over, they completely destroyed it, went bankrupt, and couldn't pay us for it wasn't a lot of lease. It was just basically the cost of the equipment they were leasing from us. Mm-hmm. And Troy, talk to us a little bit. I'm sure you've worked with farmers that, are just either teetering or kind of failing, you're not doing so well.
Yeah, I see this a lot. And so, Michael touched on this, which is you go into this field of farming to do something that you love, right? You love being out there, but then when it comes to producing the food and selling it, sometimes you err on the cost game, right? Where you try to make it the lowest cost because you want people to get there. And so there are a lot of farms that we work with. In particular, what I do is help them with lean, which is basically to help them operate a better, efficient operating business so that they can make a profit. Because at the end of the day, you want to continue to do that. If you're in farming to do a business for life, then you're in there to make a profit because you want to get into that space. And so what Michael said there, as far as the farmer being the shareholder, is key, because you're the centerfold of how you want to run that operation. And what Michael's really going to share today, and what I try to help the farmers with too, is that what do you truly want to do? Like, what do you know about your farming business? Because it's not always a game of, I want to grow this, I want to grow that. You have to kind of put your head down and say, this is what I'm going to focus on doing, and then commit to doing that. So that way you have a business that's growing. It doesn't mean that you don't dabble, and it doesn't mean that you don't try different things with your customer base, but it does mean that you try to stick to some type of lane and build a business.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, I think a lot of times, especially when I started farming, when people started talking about profit and they started asking me to look at numbers, my eyes glazed over, because it was like, this is not what I signed up for. But unfortunately, and maybe fortunately, the most important part of your farm is what you do spending behind your desk, working out those numbers.
Yes.
At the beginning of the year. So we're going to do a slide here. And again, some of you on this webinar might be at the end of this and be like, I really actually fell into that hobby. Is this training for me? Yes, it absolutely is for you, because if you decide you still want to be a hobby farmer, that's fine. I just asked that you start looking at certain aspects of your business like a entrepreneur, like that thriving farmer. And so you understand what it is to be profitable. Because again, with a thriving farmer, and for us, the thriving farmer is someone who wakes up excited about what they're doing. They're the next generation, or they have a succession plan that's going to happen at some point because someone wants to take the business over because it's profitable, and it gives them space to enjoy their farm and their business. Because a lot of the reason why we love farming is it's out in nature. It's with family. It's away from the hustle and the bustle of life. And if we're dreading going to that farm because it's never making money, that's not good. So first we need to have a clear vision, then a proper business setup and separate finances. And then we're also looking to make decisions by information, not is it good? Does it look good? Does it feel good? You want to really put the pencil to it. Are the tomatoes making you more money than the lettuce? Or the turnips actually ever turn a profit? So it's also too, with the thriving farmer, is you focus on the customer. It's what the customer wants, because the customer is driving your business. Kind of what you basically need to provide solutions to their problems. And we'll get to that in a little bit later. But then also understanding the value of labor and the key roles needed on the farm too. Because again, with any farm business, you're never going to be able to grow unless you add people. But if you add the wrong people in the wrong places on your farm, you're just going to have massive expenses for your farm and not actually ever turn a profit. So let's compare that thriving farmer to the hobby farmer. He's trying something new all the time because he's never sure what actually works. He doesn't have any data to back it up. He's complaining about the lack of customers. And there was farmers like this at our market, literally halfway through the market that still have a bunch of product on the truck. And so they would just dump the prices, drop the prices by half, make the bin twice as big. And because they were just trying to sell out. They didn't want to take anything home because it was too much work. Well, the problem is that builds sale or deal buyers that show up at the end of the market. They wait till the end of the market. So you're training people to only shop with you when you're cheap. And that is not what any business model that works well is doing.
Yes. Hey, Michael,
Yeah.
Melinda chatted in real quick, and it's kind of related to what you mentioned, which is hiring labor and growing the farm. So she said, is there like a particular threshold that you think through, or a rule as far as when you add labor and how you build that into your costs?
Oh, that's a great question. So one of the things I like to do before I add labor is I try to outsource as much as possible. So some of the things we outsource here, we outsource a lot of construction because, again, as a farmer, we're better at farming and a construction person is better at construction. Same thing with bookkeeping. We outsource the bookkeeping. We outsource some of the fab, although I do some of the fab because we have a fully equipped shop here now. I've built that over the years. So I try to outsource what I can. So one of the things like you can grow your own transplants, but there's also the opportunity to work with a local farmer and buy in your transplants. So I would rather buy in transplants from a reputable transplant producer that has the equipment and the scale and a good high quality than produce them myself if it meant I didn't have to hire a person. Now, the flip side of that is I love people and I love building a team and I love seeing people grow and be able to own the farm and the farm business. So here we're actually hiring, well, again, we have multiple businesses, so that's part of the problem too. But we're hiring before we really have a lot of profit coming in. We're still in the red for every single month with money going out because we're building our farm business. So there's a fine line there. And on one aspect, if you feel like you've maxed out everything, then you can start thinking about hiring. But usually to me, it's about simplifying your systems and not doing as much. So I like to try a couple different things, figure out what works, expand those, and then kind of get this breaking point where you realize things are just always falling through the cracks, and then you go and hire. But to that aspect too, if you can hire or you can have customers that come out and work for, just do some U-pick or something like that, that's always other ways to kind of grow your farm and expand that way. So unfortunately, Troy, there's not one right answer, I feel. And maybe you have some advice for this. It kind of comes down to every single farm and where you are and what you're trying to do.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
I think those questions, Michael, are answered through the business plan, right? The business model canvas and everything that you go through, because
Yeah.
that's going to always be a fluid document that's moving. What won't change is the vision that you have for your farm, but the business model is going to change year to year based on where you're at and reevaluating. And so I totally agree with that. It depends on your farm, it depends on where you want to go, and depends on what you understand, what you can leverage from not only what you have, but what you have around you, and are you comfortable with doing that?
And what you're good at too. So, obviously I forget who says it. There's that, the three circles, you do what you're good at, what you love, and what you can make money at. Well, I don't know anyone that perfectly fits in those three circles. I'm sure there's people out there. Some days I love my job, other days I hate my job. And I think there's always going to be that. If you're growing, you're always pushing against the resistance, and the resistance is where you grow. So that's that aspect of things. But if you are an excellent builder, maybe you do your own building. But still, like, if you can either build this or you can plant more lettuce, which is going to make you more money, then you hire the building out. This last summer we built a mushroom house, and I knew, based on the complicated schematics of the controls and that, it was easier and faster for me to do all the wiring, even though I'm not an electrician, even though I had to do a little bit of thinking about it because of the complexity of that. So it wouldn't have made sense for me to hire it out. But if I'm hiring a greenhouse, I can just walk in there and say, this is where this goes, this is where this goes, and he can do the whole job himself. Yes. So it's
I got a couple questions coming in here that I think would be awesome for this.
Yeah.
So one person said that they run a greenhouse, and at the end of the season they discount their prices and sell it out. Are they sending the wrong message to the customers that they're having cheap plants? Okay.
No, that's actually okay. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's actually a good place to discount, because obviously at that point you're trying to just shut down and clean out. And the reason why people are paying full price for plants through the most of the season is that they want to get them into the ground at the right time. And so obviously if you're coming to you super late and picking up the stragglies, they're overgrown, they're probably got a little bit of disease maybe starts to move in, and they're not the ideal time to plant. So in that case, go for it. I think that's a good move to clean out, so you can sanitize, you can send any team you have home. Yeah, great question.
And Marvin questioned in about, he's trying new things, just getting started. Is there any criteria for trying and starting out new ideas? I feel like you might cover this later in the deck when we go through the business model canvas and what it looks like to build that out for your farm. And so maybe we'll hold off on that one.
Yeah.
The last one here from Andy just says, it really comes to demand of your area, and you can meet that demand as a grower. So more of a comment. So Marvin, we will get to your question, I believe, later in Michael's presentation.
Yeah, what I would say to that, because I don't think I'm going to say this exact thing later, is that I love Jim Collins, anything that's written by Jim Collins in the business space. And he uses the analogy of fire bullets than cannonballs. And so one of the mistakes we made early on was we were like, man, I hate beets. They don't germinate well. I'm going to transplant all my beets this year. So instead of doing like 25% transplanted and 75% in the ground, just to kind of like test the transplanting, we went full in. And Troy, what happened? You can tell me exactly what happened.
Yeah. You want to definitely be cautious before you do the full dive in there. Really, for anything in life, Michael. I mean, throw farming out the window if you're going to go head first into anything like that. It's usually
So yeah, I mean, try things, but try little bits. Like if you're trying a new variety, don't do the whole greenhouse in it. Do a partial row. So one of the farms we work with, I don't have the sheet anymore, but he gave me very detailed, we have several years of very detailed grafted versus ungrafted tomatoes. And what we found for him, and again, it changes on the farm, he had a 10% bump in grafted. And so basically we basically now over multiple years have enough data to spend the extra money to graft every single tomato on his property, because we know 10% yield over 10,000 plants will give him X amount more money. So again, but we tried it a little bit before we dived in and spent $4 on every single transplant times 10,000 transplants. Yeah, it's a heck of a lot of money on tomatoes. Yeah. All right, so let's move into these 4 steps here. And again, we're gonna go high level again. So we're just gonna try to pique your interest and get you thinking about some stuff. But for us, the 4 steps to starting strong is to build the right farm model. Okay, that's the first step. Second is develop your farm plan. Third is the figure your farm finances. And then fourth is the finally fund your farm. And again, funding your farm can mean a lot of different things to a lot of people. So we'll talk through a few different options once we get down there. All right, so do you need a business plan? I think that's something that a lot of people, if you go downtown and you want to say, oh, I want to start a business, they'll say, you're going to need a business plan. Well, some sort of business plan is going to be incredibly helpful. We recommend everyone do something, okay? You want to organize your thoughts, think through those finances. One of the things to think about, let's say you have a good business plan and you're solidly working on that plan. What happens when a huge opportunity comes, okay? So a chef reaches out, you say, I'm going to go to farmer's market. And you've got them all lined up, you're paid up, and then a chef shows up and says, I want to buy your product from you. Well, what if you kind of veer off that and then he ends up not being able to buy all that product? But if you had stuck to your business plan and say, you know what, it's great that you want to buy from me. I'm going to be able to spare this amount of product for you every single week because my sole focus is on these other customers which are committed to me over the long haul. And so having that plan gives you that basis to ground yourself and going back to, instead of just being all over the place with everything. We've seen so many people, and I think that there's the analogy out there, Troy, of someone who's digging for diamonds, and literally they say one day, they say, I'm done. And then, there's the picture of the diamond literally being just beyond where they were digging. And we see that a lot with farmers is they tried a sheep. And sheep didn't work, so they tried something else. And if they just stuck a little bit longer, then they would build that flywheel and get that enterprise going and making money.
Yeah, I mean, that's just pure entrepreneurship, right? I mean, farming is entrepreneurship at its finest. And so to be good at it, you have to stick with it. And we all feel like that sometimes where we get to that first year and we're not sure that we want to do it anymore. But you have to push through that, and farming is no different.
And I'm going to say, Troy, because I actually don't cover this, but the number one mistake that we see farms make, and we work with farms to rectify every single day, is they try to grow too much the first couple of years. Or they grow maybe like a very small amount the first year, and they're like, oh my gosh, that worked. So they said, I'm going to do 10 times. Woo! It's like 100 times the work. Maybe go a little bit bigger. But the thing is, if you're not managing at 100%, you don't have any business expanding. That's my rule of thumb. If you are going to do a full business plan, that may be required if you're going to go for conventional lending. That's the only reason you would do that. What we like to talk about is a business canvas or a one-page business plan. And the thing you always should have detailed is the financials, because the financials are going to help you anywhere, anytime. It's going to give you just that grounding again. And, we are on a talk here with a seed company. So they're obviously talking about, vegetables. I know they do think of pumpkins, corn, that kind of stuff. But what type of farm do you want? That's super important. And how does that fit your farm? So here again, we got 8 acres. It's prime vegetable land. We're on an unlimited aquifer, so we can pump as much water as we want up. And we're going to focus on vegetables, horticulture, and mushrooms, because those are incredibly high dollars per acre. We have a very key retail location, and we can literally walk our produce across the street. We're gonna have a stand across there and sell it there. Compare that to someone who's out in the middle of Oklahoma and basically is multiple hours from their market, and they have 800 acres of marginal land. They're gonna start a very different type of farm. So this is incredibly important for you as you're thinking through starting your farm and your farm plan. What type of farm do you want, and how does that fit your life goals, the stage of life you're in, and the different aspects of what you want out of that farm? Because again, Troy, if you just had a brand new baby, and again, congrats on that, but you don't want to be going out brand new farm, 100 acres this year, because that's not the stage you're in your life.
Yes. Yeah. And would you add too, Michael, like try to study at least as far as you can on your customer demographic, because I would imagine that matters too, right? If you want to start just a vegetable production farm, but the area you're in doesn't actually promote providing you the revenue that you need, whether you're doing markets, whether you're doing restaurants, whether you're doing CSA program, I think it's smart to do somewhat of market research, talk to some other people in the area to try to understand what that is first too. I would say that that's probably top of mind. Would you agree?
Absolutely. And I think we might have a slide on that later, but back to what you just said, because I'm glad you brought that up, because that is absolutely so important. So when we started here, we kind of did a little research on the area about like if there was anyone doing mushrooms. There was a couple small folks doing it. But what we found, the niche we found, and actually literally 15 minutes before I sat down with you, is I was outside packing mushrooms because we have an order for 40 pounds of mushrooms that's going out. And how we're selling most of our mushrooms is to other CSAs because they are more than happy to have an add-on to their CSAs. And this order going out tomorrow is 40 pounds, at $16 or $14 a pound. So you add that up, that's a kind of a nice little order for the beginning of February for our farm. But with our retail store, we're in a very blue collar neighborhood. The number one business in town is the Dairy Queen. They make the most money. I mean, there is constantly a line outside the Dairy Queen. So we realized that this is not going to be the type of farm stand, which has, rustic wood and is charging, $16 for a bag of salad mix. We're going to be selling the beans, potatoes, tomatoes, and corn. Okay. So that's just how we realized. Now, over the years, our goal is to educate our clientele to buy some of those more fun things that we want to grow. But we know what we're getting into here. We've kind of already done it. And did you know something that I didn't know? Half runner beans. It's like a thing. It's a regional thing. Literally, like if you watch the buy and sell groups in our area on the Facebook, literally every week in the summer, someone says, anyone have any half runner beans? So guess what we're growing a heck of a lot of this year.
Interesting. So this is perfect, Michael, because somebody just chatted, and I'm going to get to everybody's questions too. I see somebody in the Q&A, and I see a couple in the chat, and we'll get to all your questions. But this one really relates to that. And so it says, how do you address products that are customer favorites, but not actually cost effective?
Yeah, that's great. And for us, and some people may say this is cheating, we're not going to be growing sweet corn. Because we just know we've grown it way too long. We know our return on that. We only have 6 acres of field production, and we know tomatoes will make 10 or 15 times that. Okay. Now, one of the couple things to look there is can you grow it a different way that's more effective? So we switched from matted row strawberries to annual bed system strawberries because it's a more profitable way for us to grow strawberries. Some of the crop, like melons, winter squash, they're very hard to get money out of. But we do wholesale winter squash, and the way we do that is it's all on plastic, and the whole field is undercover. So basically, we never have to weed it, and we never have our crop comes out of the field incredibly clean. We never have to wash it, and so all we do is we plant it, lay the fabric, irrigate all summer, spray once or twice for bugs and disease, and then we harvest it. So we've just built a system around being more efficient with that crop, so we're not putting in the very expensive man hours. The other thing would be to take a customer favorite and tweak it. So instead of maybe growing regular zucchini, we tweaked it to start growing the Zephyr, which is a 2-tone zucchini, or the Costa Romanesco, or the Lebanese zucchinis, which are more unique and you can charge a premium for. Another thing is this change how you sell it. So go from, let's say, like by the pound to a quart, or from a quart to by the piece. So you kind of just change up how you sell it. If you notice, Burger King and McDonald's never sell the exact same combos because they never want you to be able to compare apples to apples. And if you go to any site, you'll be like, oh, this person has it at 46 ounces and this one has 32 ounces, and you're left trying to figure out the math. Thankfully, the grocery stores give us that price per ounce. But if without that, we'd be incredibly confused about what actually soup was cheaper.
Yes.
So I think, this was back to who you're selling to. We obviously love to compare, the 30-ish millennial mom with 2 kids compared to someone who's more middle-aged or, baby boomer age. They're going to be very different customers who you're selling to. They're going to just be a very different demographic. So that's definitely something to think about, who you're selling to, and do your customer research. Talk to your customers, get their feedback. We had our what we call our raving fans, which get special treatment because we were craving their feedback on any new products we had. The other thing that kind of goes into your business plan here is going to be your sales channels. And so sales channels is how you're selling your product, okay? So if you're going to on-farm at an on-farm store, that'd be one sales channel. If you're at a CSA, that'd be another sales channel. If you're at farmer's market, that's another sales channel. We obviously like the ones in green right up here, these top four. Groceries, restaurants be a little more challenging, and institutions and commodity is going to be your hardest thing. Now, not to say there can't be flukes. I know commodity, or let's say a produce auction, this year, 2020, spring of 2020, people were killing it at the produce auction because with the whole pandemic, people were going crazy about getting fresh food and the prices were absolutely sky high. Another thing to think about here too, Troy, is your value ladder. So I know a lot of us started off with, we were just selling vegetables. We were just selling, let's say you're selling pumpkins in the fall and that's all you sold. And your value ladder could be, they come for a pumpkin, you upsell them to some corn shocks and the straw bales, which I was blown away by how much people were willing to pay for straw bales, because we actually did a whole fall display here on the farm last year. And then your other upsell would be maybe give them a wagon ride around the whole farm. We have a business here which has a corn maze, and their basic offer right here is $10 per person to come to the corn maze, and you have to book the ticket. Their upsells are go-kart rides. They are, another upsell is all the food they sell. Another part of that upsell would be the pumpkins and gourds and corn shocks that they sell.
Yes. Yeah, I'll add too here, Michael. We have a farm nearby that I think does an excellent job at this. And so they started off as a vegetable production farm, but then they retooled an old barn that they had, and now they run a little market store. Not only do they put their own grown in there, but they source from local farms in their barn. They also do, you pick on the side, and then they do corn mazes. And then what I think is unique is they've created a little mini event. So it's not like they have to do this elaborate thing, invite people, but they bring in small food trucks to the farm there and actually do a little corn bag toss games and all that. And so it's not like this invite everybody, but just create a little bit of an atmosphere for families to care to go there. And then naturally they'll go in, they'll shop the farm, the barn, and then they'll grab some food and stuff. And so think about those things when you're building out your spaces too, if you're truly trying to build up that value ladder.
Yeah, and so we actually have a local friend here which has a horses and this big wagon. And we actually had him come out to the farm this summer and do rides. And I think next year, because again, we're really trying to build traffic and build what's happening, we will try to see if I can get him out to come out like every couple of weeks. And again, we'll probably offer it for free because our goal is to use that as a freebie to pull them in to buy from our store. Yeah. But I think the next year we could flip that and actually start charging for that. Obviously, when you start charging, your liability goes through the roof. Yeah, again, there's all sorts of ways to do that. But
I'll add this to your value chain too. Think about it as leverage, because a lot of the times when you do events or anything like that, you can partner with people, you can get sponsors, and what happens is you end up using that to engage with people in the community that you don't have to do yourself. So in other words, if you run a corn maze and you sponsor a 5K throughout it, or a trivia game or a treasure hunt, if there's an organization in the community that does stuff like that and you want them to kind of come in and sponsor, now you're leveraging them, their networks, their social media and everything. And so think about the value ladder from leveraging out your community too.
Yeah, absolutely. So here's the business canvas we've been kind of hinting at. And the thing about the business canvas is you look at it, you'd be like, what the heck is all of that? And that's exactly how I looked at it the first time I did, because I was like, oh, that looks crazy. I'm not going to ever touch it. But then I started diving into it and I was like, oh, this is actually really cool. So I spent a number of hours diving into it, reading literally every single article on the internet about it. And then we started actually playing around with it for the businesses we're working with. And we actually made up a couple, in one of our courses, we've made up a couple sample business, we made 3 different business plans around these business canvases. So that was a lot of fun. But I'm going to kind of go through like what the overview of that is business canvas is everything on one sheet and it'll help you organize your thoughts. So again, you may be thinking all over the place, but it helps you kind of wrap everything into one area. It also simplifies the long, arduous process. So a lot of people like a business plan is 40 pages long, and that is completely overwhelming. And so actually, when we ran this training we do with this business canvas, someone said, oh my gosh, I finally finished my business plan because of how you walked me through it. And we really like to run these for any new enterprise on our farm. And what it really helps is when you want to go over on a high level with investors or key partners. So again, let's say I'm trying to get outside funding. I pull in an investor and say, hey, I want to walk you through what we're doing here. They're probably not going to want to see a 40-page business plan at first, but they will definitely allow me to sketch out for them the one-page business canvas. And I'll be like, all right, I like your idea. Let's now go look at that 40-page business plan.
Yes.
So here's how it is kind of broken down, just to kind of give it a little bit of an overview here, is this side is all about the customers. So it's the customer segments or the avatars of who you're selling to, the channels of how you get customers and how you deliver that product, and then, the customer relations. So how you're actually building those relationships. And then on this side, it's the feasibility. So the key partners, the key activities, the key resources, and the value is kind of what ties everything together. And then down below is the financial viability. So your cost structure, like what your expenses are, and then your revenue streams of how people pay you for your products. And again, this is something you can spend hours on. We don't have time for that tonight, but we will, go over a few aspects of this.
And if anybody's curious, there's an awesome book out there too that'll help you leverage this. I think it's called Business Model Canvas. It's got great illustrations and examples, just like Michael's talking about. I would encourage you to look that up, because not only will Michael's training help advance your ability to complete this, but that book will help provide you a nice visual of what it looks like to get it done.
Yeah. So the big, obviously most important part of this is that value proposition. I mean, why should people buy from you? If you're at the farmer's market in Saratoga on a Saturday morning, there would be 60 some farmers, okay? 23 of those was vegetable farmers. We would consistently outsell every single one of those. And the reason for that is we had figured out why they should buy from us. And so obviously there's a lot of ways to think about that. And so let's say a young mother who's worried about safe food. She's got little kids. She's heard about the whole E. coli scare. She's really worried that her kids would get that because she knows it's very dangerous. And so she trusts you as her source for good local food. And that's why she's buying from you. So she's safe food. But the next guy, he's the assistant DA in the area, and he just wants to put on a very fancy dinner and have some cool salad that he can show people, and everyone's like talking about, oh wow, those flowers in that salad was so cool. So he's looking for quality. And then you have another one, the neighbor lives across the street from the market or your store. The only reason they're there is because it's easy to get there. So they walk across the street and buy from you. So there's a lot of different aspects. And when you're selling to people, there's going to be different avatars and different value propositions that they have. And then the third part we really need to dive into is this aspect of financials, okay? So financials for any business are incredibly important. And if you're going to go out for any type of funding, they're absolutely going to want to see the financials. So we literally just closed on a USDA loan here. Again, if you do want to borrow money, now's the time to borrow because interest rates are just ridiculously low. We ended up getting $50,000 at 1.5% interest. I mean, that is, there's some savings accounts out there that are almost better than that right now.
Yes.
So yeah, it was.
Where do you go to? Because I know some people are familiar with the USDA and maybe where to go to get those. But what would be your best advice for seeking those out? Where can they go to get those? Other loans? Yeah, for the USDA one that you applied for and everything.
Yeah.
What's the best resource you would recommend for people to go to?
Yeah, so we actually might get there, but if you go to the farmers.gov, there's actually a loan tool that will walk you through the different things they offer. But what I want to recommend is just go to your local FSA or USDA service center and sit down and just chat with your loan agent. They're going to be able to walk you through what they got to offer and if they're a right fit for you now. So again, we just basically started calling around because obviously in these day and age, no one's going anywhere. But again, it took a while too. I mean, that's the other problem with these USDA loans. It literally just takes, it seems to take forever and like 90 to 180 days to get these. Yeah, because we basically started the loan process July. We didn't close till like December 27th or 28th or something like that. So granted, this year was really crazy for them. So that's why it happened, but it was a little bit challenging. So one of the things with their financials is there's 4 key financial documents that every single farm needs to have and know. The first one is going to be your profit and loss statement. If you're doing your own books, you're going to be familiar with this one. This is also called an income statement. Every single month, you can basically do any time period, but you basically see money in, money out, and where you are based on that. And so that gives you an idea of where you're spending in different categories. Also the balance sheet. So the balance sheet is where a lot of farm profit ends up hanging out. And a lot of people, they come to me and like, Michael, I made 27,000 this year, but I only have 2,000 left. Where did it all go? Because I seem to do really well. Well, if you bought any capital improvements like hoop houses or a tractor or made truck payments with that farm, that's giving you equity. And when you have more equity, that means you have more on your balance sheet, but it may look like your profit is hanging out there, and it does hang out there frequently. You've also got your cash flow projections, and we're actually going to get into this in another couple slides because this is one of the very important spreadsheets that you need to know and understand. And then finally, we want to talk a little bit about enterprise budgets. And so this right here, the enterprise budgets, is more for farmers that have been doing it for a bit. Because if you're at the brand new, have never done farming before, you're going to have a very hard time figuring out any sort of numbers about this. But you do want to look at some projections here because the USD, any loan person is going to usually want to see some projections for that. And so for us, this is what the first side of those projections look like. So this is where you put all your supposed income in. So again, brand new farm, you're not going to know what you're going to make. You can't forecast that unless you have very specific contracts that say, I will buy X at X price for X. So you may have that, but most farms don't. So you're just going to have to make a wild stab and guess at it. Part of it would be, let's say if you're going to go to a farmer's market, visit that farmer's market during the summer and see what other vendors are selling and see what quantities they are and say, okay, well, their lettuce mix just doesn't look good and it's at this price. We can come in at this price. I think we could probably sell X amount more. So again, this is all projections. And the one thing that they say about business plans is you make them, and then the day you start your business, you throw them out the window. Because again, that's just what they are, is a plan. It's never going to actually be that way. But I love these things because it really helped us to think through every aspect of our farm business and be like, oh, we want this, and this. And this is how we're going to manage that. And so that really gave us an idea of how we were going to move forward with the farm. And then we were able to go for the funding based on that. And then the second part of that is all your expenses. So obviously we talked all the income. We showed the different channels that could come in through that, the different ways you were selling that. But then on the opposite side, right here, you have your produce sales. Then you have, let's say you do some custom work. So where you have now a small tractor that's going to have a rototiller around the back. And this spring, I'm going to send that around the whole community, offering to till people's gardens, because I know then I can first charge them for the garden, but I also can sell them the plants and sell them the fertilizer and maybe even sell them advice or some mini garden consulting for folks. So again, all sorts of ways to bring in money from the different things. And then obviously with any farm, you're going to have, fuel, fertilizers, office supplies. And if you're hiring people, payroll expense is going to be your number one expense here. If you follow this across, this is actually 59%, of, I don't know why it keeps doing that, of this budget. Okay, so 60% of this budget, which is super high. We love to see labor in the 25. Sometimes we see it down as low as 20, frequently up to 40% if a farm's not doing well though.
Hey, Michael, real quick, there was a question earlier around this topic, which is how do I do my labor calculations? Is it based on area, crop production? Like, how do I come up with those? So do you have templates or tips that you have that you have calculated how much labor you need versus the plot area, or however you're measuring your farm?
The problem is, Troy, is there's so many variables that's almost impossible to come up with. So I work at the farm down in Tennessee. They're doing less than an acre. They have 2 full-time folks running production, mostly BCS and hand tools. And then they have 1 person in the office full-time, 2 part-timers in the wash and pack, and the farm owner who's focused on projects. That farm does around $350,000 to $400,000 a year. Yeah. And obviously the people that are working in the field, I think they're about 20, 22 an hour. So again, highly skilled, massive production on that very small piece. I do know farms that are doing 5 acres and have 1 person and then a part-time helper. And then some of the farms in the Hudson Valley, 40 acres of vegetables, and they're running a crew of 6 to 12.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
it's almost impossible to figure that out.
Yeah, so it's going to depend on your farm. Yeah, I was just curious if you had anything. It's definitely going to depend on your farm. When we talk about lean there, with some of the farms that we do, we talk about that sharing of resources. If you're not in a position to hire, but you need the help, like you mentioned even earlier, you can do a work share program, right? Where you can have people in the community come out and help you do a few things like weeding and all that. And what's that's nice is they get some of the produce, but you get a lot of the labor. Maybe you even get a few referrals and stuff out of that too.
Yeah.
And so don't be afraid to leverage that if you're trying to still figure out what it looks like to hire for your farm.
Yeah, because Troy, vegetables have incredible margins. I mean, where else can you put in a penny seed into the ground and 3 weeks later pull out a radish that you can probably get 25 cents for?
Yep.
So again, if I could, I would just be growing radishes. But yeah, so I think the thing is too, is with this, is we, on a really good farm, we see anywhere from $50,000 to $100,000. Whoops, we way went for it on that. $50,000 to $100,000 per full-time equivalent.
Yeah.
Okay. If you're not doing that, you've got something wrong with your business model. Okay. All right. So let's move on to enterprise budgets. So this is more for the advanced farms. And I know we have some advanced farmers on here. So this is a deep dive into those numbers. You did mention earlier, some people saying, hey, some of these crops aren't making me money. You're doing your enterprise budgets. That's awesome. So this is a simple one that we came up with. And this is something that you can see. You can see the crop expense here. You can see either a price or a labor rate. So let's say field prep for, spreading, plowing, disking, rototilling, plastic laying. We like to count that as $60 an hour. It depends on how much you use. You can see the harvesting, spraying, packing boxes. You can see all those different things. Then you can obviously, there's spaces to add expenses here. This is blacked out because there's a lot of actually, I think behind here is some formulas running. So I didn't want anyone to mess with those. And then you can put in like your different rates for different things and the square feet devoted to the crop. And then what it does is based on your prices, kicks out profit per square feet. And if you go and type in like enterprise budget, you'll find a lot of different forms for that. There's a lot of different things out there. This is the one I built because it was basically a super quick, easy way, and it worked with some of the systems that we were working with. So again, there's a lot of different ways you can look at it. Now, an enterprise budget is not COGS, because COGS is what's considered cost of goods sold. And so how we like to think about that is, let's say our mushrooms, we buy in mushroom blocks, we buy in packaging for those mushrooms. We then fruit the mushrooms in about 2 weeks and we package them up and sell them. So the labels for the boxes, and the blocks, that basically the pre-inoculated blocks that come to us, are all cost of goods sold. Now the electricity, because it's going to our entire farm, that is more of an overhead expense. The tractor, because it's actually feeding the entire farm, is an overhead expense. It's actually capital, but we're probably going to put that in the overhead, the payments on that in overhead. So again, all sorts of ways you can look at it. But again, this is something that helps you keep track of things. The thing about these is they're essential to see how a particular product line is contributing to the bottom line. So again, if you just do it for one product, you're not going to get very good numbers. But if you run these on multiple products, you start to see how they compare and contrast with each other.
Yes.
Let's throw a little bit on expenses here too, because this is definitely something to think about, is debt servicing. A lot of people don't think about that. If you're by a tractor or you have a vehicle, you have payments on it, you have to pay off that, pay another principal and the interest of capital. And again, principal is not necessarily going to be, you're not going to be able to write that off unless you're depreciating the piece of equipment at the same rate. Interest is always a write-off, but principal may not be, depending on what your CPA is going to tell you. Then there's also things as variable expenses and fixed expenses. And we talked about the COGS earlier, and then some taxes. Now, the difference between the variable and the fixed, things that like fixed costs is usually things like insurance, business licenses. If you have a flat rate utility for things like water, that might be a fixed cost. Otherwise, it's probably variable. But it's usually like, probably the same, unless let's say you have coolers and they get, a big spike in energy in the summer. Variable costs are typically going to be things like payroll. If you're paying hourly, if you're paying salary, typically we like to see that under fixed costs because it's the same amount every single month. And then variable costs is going to be taxes depending on how much you make and those cost of goods sold. Because again, if I sell 100 pounds of mushrooms, I'm going to have 100 boxes compared to if I sell 10 pounds of mushrooms, I'm going to have 10 boxes. And all right, let's finally jump into the funding side of this. I think the thing here, the big point to come across is there's no such thing as free money. I think a lot of people I want to start a farm. Who knows of any grants to get me started? Not how it works, folks. People who loan money want to get a return on their investment. And a couple different types of funding we'd like to see out there too. Typically with land, it's going to be a mortgage. With equipment, that's going to be an asset. Equipment's an asset. So things like tractors, delivery vehicles. Typically talk to the salesman because like tractors, most of the companies have a 0% program going on. And things like greenhouses are going to be equipment. Typically, you're going to have to do that with more of a business loan or check with your NRCS. Sometimes there's some funding for that. And then for operation side of your business, so this is the working capital for the, working capital for things like payroll and all of that. This is typically what we call like a line of credit. And that's for labor, seeds, different consumables on the farm. And then the final type of funding would be for research. So that's things for grants. Make sure you do your proper research on this as well. That's going to be important as well, and do the proper accounting as well on that. So there you go. That's a little bit of the overview of funding. Now, again, different places you can go for funding. Obviously, we love to see self-funding the first year or two. And the reason for that is, let's say you try it, you don't like it, and now you're stuck on the hook for like $10,000 or $20,000 of people's money. You're going to have to repay that. It might be a lot harder to do if you don't have the business up and running. So that's why we like to see the first year, 2 years self-funded, then go out and go get a USDA loan, one of the micro loans, which are pretty easy to get, or go to crowdfund to your customers. And again, one of the easiest ways to get money for your business is a crowdfund to, let's say, like a CSA program with your customers. We like to see that after year 2. So we like to give a couple years of experience with that and then have people dive into getting that from them. Because again, a couple ways to do it. One way is say, hey, you pay me $600, I'll give you vegetables every single week during the season, let's say 26 weeks. The easier way to do that is say, hey, give me $450, now I'll give you $500 in credit towards the food that you're buying from our farm stand. So that's an easier way to do it. You can go with like banks. Banks are harder to work with unless you're further along your farm journey, and especially if you have good collateral for them to kind of back up your what you want to fund. So I think that's the kind of the key aspect of there is, knowing those financials that we talked about are going to, when you walk into a bank or walk into someone you want to fund, they're going to give you a lot more credibility because you're able to back that up.
Yeah, one thing here, Mike, I just want to throw out at you. So when you're considering financing too, what part of like the business plan factors into that? And so what I mean is, like, we would like to grow X amount of crops, right? Whether it's 8 to 10 things, right? And then X amount of pounds of quantity and how we're going to sell that. Do you build in certain thresholds? Because if you're considering financing, you don't want to be at that 100% threshold of where you think you're going to sell. And then when you don't reach that, now you're stressed out about where your financing is. And so do you have any experience around that with farms you worked with or yourself that kind of shares that buffer or that threshold?
Yeah, so let's talk through that. Let's give a couple scenarios. I can break down some scenarios for you. So that's why we like to see 2 years of experience, because then we have a track record. We have at least a little bit of a track record. So let's say you are a brand new farmer, first year, you interned at another farm, so you have like 4 months of experience. You're going to borrow some land from the neighbor, and you're looking for $10,000 to basically pay for a part-time employee, some compost, your seeds, and a small seeder. Well, without any track record, the fact that you don't own your own land, there's no assets for the bank to seize if you go under, they're probably not going to approve that loan, okay? Yes. Compare that to someone who's in their third year of farming. The year before, they did $40,000. The year before that, they did $15,000. So they got a good track record of income. This year, they want to buy a tractor because in the previous years, they've used just a rototiller. And when they buy this tractor, they'll be able to double their land space, but spend 1/10 of the time on tillage, okay? So we can see a positive ROI. We know we can grow more crops. They are consistently selling out, and they have a wait list in their neighborhood for their CSA. And they want to buy a tractor, which is a very easy asset to reclaim. So let's say they went out of business. It's a very easy asset to go get for that bank. They don't have to try to pull up a greenhouse. They literally put the key in the tractor and drive it off the farm. So that's why that's much more likely to get funded. Now, when we talked a little bit about the line of credit's for getting spring startup funds. And that typically right there, that's a little bit harder to get because they want to see a little bit more of collateral around that. Because again, that's things for labor, for soil, all things that are usable. Again, not like equipment that is something that that's easy to reclaim. Actually, for our microloan, so they wanted to see, they basically are holding all of our equipment as collateral for the microloan, and we're buying like 2 pieces of equipment with that microloan, so they're holding that as for collateral as well. But the thing is, like, we're building a greenhouse with a majority of that microloan, so that's going to actually be, and why they wanted to hold so much collateral is because greenhouses, after you build them, immediately lose half their value. So you may put up a $20,000 greenhouse. The day after it's installed, it's only worth $10,000 because there's so much labor in taking that greenhouse down.
Yes. All right. Thank you.
So I don't know if that kind of helped a little bit. And again, if people have very specific questions about funding, we'll dive into that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I think the key part you mentioned in the beginning there is experience, right?
Yeah.
Just shoot from the hip. So having some experience will help you with any type of funding that you're going to tackle.
Yeah.
We have probably, I think, 4 questions. Let's see if we can kind of cover these.
Yeah.
I'll go from most recent, but I'll make sure that I cover all your guys' questions out there. And so Melinda just chatted in. How do you evaluate property qualities if it will make a good farm when it is underdeveloped still?
We actually have an ebook on that. I forget the exact URL, but we can find that for you, okay? I'll make sure I do find that for you because that's a really good ebook. It walks through 6 different categories. And we actually also walk through some of the online resource tools that are around that. So that's something that people really, that's the number 2 mistake. We said the number 1 mistake was growing too fast. The number 2 mistake is buying the wrong property. I know multiple farms that went out of business because they had the wrong type of property. So let's lay it down. First is soil. You want a sandy loam. You want to be out of the flood zone. Second would be you want to have plenty of water. We bought the farm we're on because 40 feet down is one of the largest aquifers in the nation, the cleanest aquifers in the nation. Number 3, you want good access. And that would be you want good power, you want good cell signal, you want good internet, you want access for trucks to get in and off your property, you want access to supplies. So literally, if I look out my window on the side of my house, I can see the neon sign from our local lumber yard. How many hours do you think that saves me a month?
Yes.
I'm down there 3 times a day sometimes. And people may say I have a habit, but I'm only buying what I need. I don't have to make these long lists. I can literally very fluidly do projects on the farm because I have that right down there. So that's another aspect. Proximity to markets. Right outside here on this road, 12,000 cars a day go by. Again, built-in market. After our stand is up, we shouldn't have to market after that because again, 12,000 cars are going by our billboard every single day. So those are kind of the top things I would go over. Clay soil is literally the worst. Never, never, never farm clay if you're going for vegetables, especially. If you're with animals, okay, you can go for that. My brother's on some pretty heavy clay out in Oklahoma. Grows good grass. He still struggles a little bit in the spring with plugging. But yeah, also flood zone. We lost in 2011 with Hurricane Irene just power up the East Coast. Come into Vermont, drop a foot of rain, and that foot of rain, because Vermont is all hills and all valleys, ran off the mountains into the valleys and ran right into New York where we were and flooded out over $100,000 worth of vegetables. Ooh. So be very careful about floodplain, even though it is some of the most fertile soil in the world, because all that silt is deposited. But it can also be, it's almost like cocaine. You're sucked in because it's such high quality. I mean, it's like chocolate dirt, chocolate cake dirt. I mean, you throw seeds in. It's like, I forget, there's this book that my wife got for me a long time. It was just one of those humorous books, but it was about Mr. McCordle's or something, 1 acre garden where literally it's 40 acres stacked on top of each other. And by 15 minutes after you plant the bean seed, the beans are ready to pull. That's kind of what river bottom soil is in one aspect, is just anything can be planted and grow, but it can hurt you because it can flood so badly.
Yes. All right, I got a question here that from Martha that says, if you're a solo farmer, how do you go about figuring out what your hourly labor is worth for yourself?
Yeah, great question. So what do you want to make?
Exactly.
I know some farmers that are content with $30,000 a year. I know some farmers that are going to clear $100,000 a year. Okay. I know one of those farmers drives a Lexus. And he basically told me one time, he's like, my parents wanted me a doctor or a lawyer when I grew up, but I don't think I could take the pay cut because they do really, really well. And obviously he spent years building that business. But he's very successful because he had a goal and started working towards that. Now, let's talk about valuing that too, because one of the things too, let's say you put in $20,000 into your business. That business should give you $2,000 profit clear above your salary. Because if you were to take that $20,000 and stick it into the stock market, it would make you at least $2,000, approximately $2,000 a year. If you're invested in some crypto right now, you're making a heck of a lot better return than that. Well, I'm just going to see how long this ride goes for. But back to the labor is, again, I would love to see. And again, one of the things, if like the first couple of years you're investing, work super hard. If you're working with a good bookkeeper, good bookkeeper is going to keep a owner's liability, owner's equity account. And part of that's going to be an owner's labor equity. And so what he can do is every hour you work into the business, he will track. And that means after a couple of years, when you start to unwind yourself and start to pull out your equity from the business, they can actually give you that back.
Yes.
And talk to your accountant on that and your CPA, because it may not work in your situation. It really depends on how you set up your business, what you can actually do. Okay. So definitely don't take my word for all of this. I think this is the last slide I had, right? Yes, that was the last slide I had, which is, we kind of already went over that, but we can exit that. And let's just go back to your questions. Let's just stay in Q&A then.
Let's do it, man. All right. Tracy said, what % of your income is from consulting versus farming? With so many wanting to farm, is there more value in consulting for farming?
And so that's, a lot of people say, Michael, you do consulting or you work with farmers because you make more money than farming. The first 3 years of consulting, we consistently made less money. And now even, we make okay money, and a lot of the money now is going into funding the farm again. But now we have a team of, gosh, we just literally hired someone last week, 2 last week. So we have now a team of like 10 on our team. So we're now building an education platform. And Troy, you're familiar with all the different things we have our fingers in.
Absolutely.
Yeah, every single week. We just closed a new deal with a company in Maine to start, adding some of their products in. So again, we're constantly doing new things. And again, it comes back to us I never want anyone to go through what I went through watching my farm in New York just crash and burn, and getting calls from my previous customers saying and crying pretty much because they didn't have a source of good vegetables any longer. And like, Michael, where do I go get good food? Because you spoiled us. I remember I went back a couple years ago for an event, because at the tail end of that farm up there, we were about to move our farm to 160 acres within the city limits in the city of Saratoga. It was a $2.3 million property. We ended up moving before the deal finalized. But once we finalized that deal, it ended up turning the whole thing into a nonprofit farm. I went back for basically the closing and the big party. And I remember seeing a former CSA customer from across the across the building. She lit right up and came right over. Are you back? She said, are you going to come back and farm this for us? And I'm sorry, but I had to break her heart because no, we weren't. And so that's definitely something, we exist as a company to help farmers build profitable systems. In 2020 was the greatest opportunity for any farm, literally, I think, in the last 40 years. We saw farmers go from 900,000 to 1.6 million. On their personal farms, their co-ops go from 1 million to 5 million. We saw a lot of farms go from 300 to 400,000, 100,000 to 200,000. One of the farms we real close friends with, literally they spent 2 hours writing checks on December 31st. They're trying to spend the money that they'd gotten. They were that far ahead. So yes, I mean, there's farms out there made way more money than we did last year as an educational business. I mean, our goal with the business is that we keep in the next couple of years, obviously that it frees me up to go back to farming. And then we can still continue to keep our message out to the world. So yes, I mean, there's some money in consulting if you build it right. The problem with consulting is you're trading. Yes. Who did that? Julia. It's Mr. McBroom's Wonderful 1 Acre Farm. Yes, that is the book. It's such a cool, funny book. And I guess for us farmers who always are going for that ultimate yield, anyway, yes. Thank you, Julia, for remembering that. Back to the aspect of, with consulting, you're trading time for money. And anytime you're trading time for money, you never truly have freedom. When you build a farm business and you build a team underneath you, which manage the day-to-day, that gives you true freedom to do what you want to do in the farm. So my ideal job role is to help with marketing, really help design the marketing systems, bring in new customers, and then just tinker in the farm shop and build new tools. That's, if I can do that, if in 5 years, that's all I'm doing every day, I will be a happy guy.
Yeah, and I'm sure you can relate to this too, but I like to think of, if you're out there teaching, in addition to growing your own farm, you're learning too. Because I know for myself, being out there with different farmers, I'm also learning. And so if it's an opportunity for you to not only make an extra revenue stream and help somebody else out, it's also an opportunity for you to teach yourself some new things that people are doing. To maybe share or do yourself. So that's always there too.
Yeah, it's interesting because I had, with a company our size, we reach about 5 million a year with our marketing. You're always going to have the haters. And we had a guy who basically was, poo-pooing a product that we had put out and basically said it was ridiculous that we were charging for that. What that guy didn't know is we've had over 800 people purchase that product, and it has probably saved farmers. Well, let's say 75% of them did it. So 600 of them did it. Each one of those farmers probably saved themselves $1,000 to $3,000 because of just how effective that one system is on the farm. And also what it did, right now we have a massive seed shortage. I mean, we're seeing, things going out of, I'm still waiting on like 24 different varieties that we're trying to get in. And what this thing does is it's a germination chamber. And you can go figure out online all the different things, but our farmers now can take their seed, they know the germination rate, they put it in a germination chamber, they're going to get 98% of what they could get because it's given the perfect environment. They pull it out 48 hours later and it goes into the greenhouse, which now can run 10 to 15 degrees cooler. So the fact that we charge, very low price for that thing, again, that took us weeks to come up with that and pull it together. But again, it goes back to me thinking about, we changed 600 farmers' lives. They now have a simple system. They no longer have to think about, oh my gosh, are the mice going to get the seeds tonight? Or did I order enough seed because I'm going to have bad germination? Or did the heat mats overheat and fry this expensive seed? So those are all things that I experienced. And so now we know, and again, that's just the power of the online world and being able to work with so many farmers, be able to kind of change their lives. So this year, I don't expect to make any money off our farm. So that was the question, is like, what percentage of our income is from consulting versus farming? And the reason for that is the next 3 years, we expect to invest every bit of profit back into the farm business. Our goal is at year 5, that will be $1 million a year business. And there's absolutely no reason why it shouldn't be, with our opportunities of where we're located, the traffic we have, and just the level of talent we're going to build around us.
Yes, beautiful. I think one last question here in the Q&A I think we should cover. So it says, what advice for a farm that wholesales everything today to go to retail on the farm? And so do you have any like pricing strategies or anything like that? I'm guessing
Yeah.
that's where John's coming from for this question.
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And I feel you because I've worked with farms like that. One thing is probably if you're wholesaling everything, you know your margins really, really well. You should. And so that way you know exactly what it costs you to produce it. And then you know if you want to make a 40% margin at retail prices, because you probably need about a 40% margin to make retail work for you, then you know what prices you need to charge at the market. Now, if you're wholesaling, depending on who you're wholesaling to, if you're going to, let's say, usually like the produce auction, your quality doesn't have to be the same as if, let's say, you're selling the Whole Foods. So if you're selling the Whole Foods, literally, you probably could take your seconds and sell those at the farmer's market, and it'll be higher quality than a lot of the stuff we see at farmers markets. Because, again, I've worked with farmers that sell just to Whole Foods. I was talking to one of them a while back, and they were talking about they do part of their farm, they drop to 5 crops, and one of their crops is 12 acres of kale. Well, they had a late fall freeze come through, and it just tinged the edge of the leaves a little bit yellow. Boom, 12 acres of kale, you no longer can sell the Whole Foods because they're so picky. Retail farmers market doesn't care. They kind of expect that kind of stuff a little bit. So you should be cool on the quality aspect. You should be cool on the efficiency. The problem with farmers markets is it's not like you can say, all right, I'm going to take 1,000 bunches of kale and sell it. It's usually like 25 bunches of kale, 25 heads of broccoli, 25 pounds of tomatoes, 25 pounds of cucumbers. So it's a wide game instead of a deep game. So I know some farms that never have left wholesale because they're so profitable and they figured out that deep niche and being super efficient at that. But to saying that, we made 90% of our income through farmers markets and did very well. You have to really up your marketing game. So I would spend some money. Make sure you brand yourself well, build a decent website, even move to the online delivery space. That's getting huge right now. Home delivery is blowing up. That's to me where I see the potential. Yeah, you're going to we have some really good trainings. If you go to our summit, we have the Thriving Farmers Summit. It's basically a 3-day free thing you can go through. Day 2 is all about marketing. So we've got Charlotte Smith, we got Karina Bench, we've got Erica Tevins, who does all about farmers markets. We've got some case studies as well. So that right there is a key resource. And I am going to give you guys a top secret link. Okay, so these links usually don't go out, but I'm going to pull that up. So it's going to take me a little bit to find that. Yeah. Anything else we got?
We had a couple questions come in here. One was any challenges with finding good people and how you go about that for labor on the farm. And then another one was computing delivery costs for CSA, or if you have any experience with that.
Yes. So computing delivery costs. So what we're seeing for delivery cost is $4.50 to $5 is usually what we're seeing being charged, anywhere up to $8. And that's basically delivery services. That's what they're going for. We have a company in Pittsburgh. It's a pretty big conglomerate. They're getting charged $8 by a distributor to kind of do those deliveries. So that's the range you kind of want to be in. Obviously, you can go cheaper if you know your margins are really, really good. Depends on the product. I mean, if you're selling popcorn, like flavored popcorns, your margin is like 800% anyway. So you could probably do free delivery if they bought $20 because your margins are so high. But yeah, so that's the kind of thing there. All right, so I'm going to give you this link right here, and I'm just going to drop this into the channelists and attendees. So again, this is a link. You're going to sign up. It's going to tell you can buy the all access. You don't need to buy the all access. You're just going to wait to day 2, and day 2 is all the marketing talks. I think there's like 8 different talks on that day, so a really good resource there.
Excellent.
And then down to labor. Yeah. So Bill, this is actually something we literally, we have a Facebook group called Your Successful Farm Business Discussion Group, and we've got over 14,000 folks in there now. And I don't know, Troy, if you, actually I don't think you're in there, because I tried to tag you the other day and I couldn't.
Which group is that?
It's the Your Successful Farm Business Discussion Group.
All right.
So I posted about the $15 federal wage that is being thrown around. We'll see if it actually goes through. Literally, it generated over 750 comments. People were like tearing into each other. But I went and did a live today about this because I said, look, it's not my decision whether I like this or I don't like this. My job as a farmer is to figure out how am I going to cope if this comes down the road.
Yes.
And one of the things we see is we see a lot of beginning farmers or farmers that don't quite know their numbers. They're like, I can't afford to pay $12. I could never afford to pay $15. Well, we're seeing a lot of our experienced farmers, they're paying $15, $20, $25 an hour because, and here's the reason why they can afford to pay that, is they have figured the systems and the processes and they've automated enough so that person is producing $1,000 an hour or maybe even like $400 an hour of product compared to someone who's out there weaving on their hands and their knees and who's barely even breaking even at $12 an hour. So what I would say on hiring is work as long as you can by yourself and get the systems down, okay?
Yep.
So my wife and I, we're still packing mushrooms. Again, I told you earlier I was packing mushrooms. We recorded a video SOP on exactly that. That will get cut out to the video chunks. It will get pictures of the SOP, and then it will get text written for the different points. Yes. And so when we have a person coming on, new person coming on, they're going to be handed the SOP and say, read this. Yes. And then they'll be like, got any questions? And they'll be like, what about this? What about this? Okay. Then I'm going to work with them the first time, and I'm going to walk them through it. The second time we do it, they're going to walk me through it. And the third time, I'm just going to come check in periodically. So it's all about empowering them, giving the proven system that works and makes you money. And I will tell you, there's always a better way to do something. Troy, you probably know there's the fast cap guy.
Yep.
Oh my gosh, that guy, you guys got some great lean trainings, but the fast cap guy, he does one particular video where he said, we have this process and it's now taking us 42 seconds. And by the end of the video, they had it down to like 18 seconds. Blows your mind. So you may think I'm doing absolutely the most efficient way. I'm going to say you're probably missing something. There's probably some way you could probably do it that's going to be more efficient for you.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we do with lean. And I know we had an interview discussion on YouTube that really dove into SOPs because it's not a glamorous thing to do, but once it's done, it's an effective tool for coaching people. And what's neat about it too is you might have people that work on your farm for years, maybe a farm manager with tremendous experience that you can lean on for everything. But most times you're hiring new people every year. You might be bringing in CSA, workshare people, volunteers. And so to have these video SOPs, and what we actually help people build is visual aids where you can create a step-by-step SOP, laminate it, and then put it out anywhere on the farm. It won't get damaged. You can hand them the sheet. It shows a visual of actually harvesting something or whatever we want to do out there on the farm. But really detailing those out and then creating a space. And so if there's an organic farm here in Ada, Michigan that does a really good job at this, where every morning, no matter what, they have a 15-minute huddle, and everything they do is they talk to, no matter what experience level you're on the farm, they specifically ask you what you've been working on for the last few weeks, and is there anything about that process that you would like to break down and share with people to do it better? And so what that does is not only teach them to really think through what they're doing and do it better, but really to break it down with everybody else in the room. And it just takes 15 minutes a week.
Man, that's good. One thing I would say to add to those visual aids is we're now seeing QR codes linking to a video of the process. So yes, you got the visual aid that basically shows you, but one of the things, let's say about bunching radishes, sometimes it's really hard to show that technique on a visual. So just have a little QR code that links to a YouTube video that shows, because everyone's carrying their phones now at times. And the other thing is you're always carrying an iPad. We use iPad for our record keeping, so we're carrying that with us now too. So that's another thing. But I'll talk you through the 6 stages we do for hiring, because I feel like we've gotten kind of good at hiring. Our last job, I think we had like 23 applications, and we narrowed it down to 1. And I was like, it was a clear winner. It was like, it wasn't even like any like, there's a night and day difference of the people we've gotten. So far, we have some really awesome hires on our team. And first, we're going to figure out what the job is. We're going to figure out who we need to hire, because some of the times you just need to outsource something. Okay, we got back to the beginning. Sometimes you just need to outsource a one-time project, or it's something that you can just move off your out of your business scope, I guess, as I'd like to say it there. And the next stage is like figure out what you need, what you're hiring for, write the job description. We call it key performance indicators or KPI, something like that. And right, that's a big long job description for exactly what they're going to do. Then you actually go out and hire to that. And not only do you want to have what they need, but what you don't want to see. Like one of the things, like if you can't work in the rain all day, don't apply. Because that's one of the things, like literally you'll hire 6 people and like 3 won't show up because it's raining one day. Well, we clean that out by just having that in there. So our goal is to have fewer high quality applicants. So part of that too then, so we do the application, it goes out literally as wide as we can. Obviously, I'm incredibly lucky. We have an email newsletter that goes to over 70,000 folks, so we can get a wide reach. But again, Facebook, Craigslist, local job postings, Indeed, all those different places. And then do a form. So we have a long form. We ask them all sorts of questions. We ask personality. We ask about the Enneagram. We ask about disc profile, because those are going to be key. I mean, part of the hiring that we're doing is hiring for a culture fit as well as a personality fit. Like, I don't know how much you know about the Enneagram, but we actually are kind of like getting strict about that on our business. So our customer service person, we looked at somebody and was like, I'm sorry, they're the wrong number on the Enneagram to be a good fit for this, just because of the skills we want them to have and how we want them to interact with our customers. So it's amazing how well you can filter people. And the other thing, a part of that we do is we put a few like slightly confusing questions that make them actually do something in a very specific order. And if they don't, we don't hire them. They've got to go through the process, because again, on a farm, there's a lot of little details usually. And if they can't follow the simple things of when they actually are trying to get hired, frequently they're not going to be able to do it when they're just trying to get by to get to the end of the 5 o'clock day. Then we also usually have them shoot a little video on their iPhone. And if they can't figure out, one of the things is it's got to be less than 2 minutes. If they send us a 3-minute video, they're disqualified because they can't follow the simple instructions. Then we do a Zoom interview. We always have 2 people in the room for that. And my wife always has, so always get the other gender to review, because I think there's things both genders cannot. And again, forgive me if this sounds however you want to take it, but I always like to get my wife's view or Kirsten, who's working for me, because they just see different things in people. And my wife has told me multiple times, she's like, oh yeah, you should never have worked with that person. I heard the interview from the other room and I didn't like him from the start. So again, we do all this work because then we get really good people that we really want to work with, that we know are going to have the best aspect of the farm at heart. So, one of the things that we were working with a group just the other week, and they were hiring, and literally his hiring ad is, hey, we're looking for some people to help us on the farm this year. DM me if you want to work. You're going to get crap with that. I mean, you might get some gold stars, but if anyone who just is, breathing, can show up, is going to get hired. And then they basically said, oh yeah, we're going to hire this guy. He's not thrilled about the pay, and he wouldn't come out and do like a half-day trial. And I was like, whoa. Red flags all over the place. If at the beginning, before he even starts working for you, he's unhappy about the pay, he's going to probably 2-3 weeks in ask for a pay raise, and you're not going to give it to him. He's going to be happy and upset and quit.
Yep.
So there you go. That's my little spiel on hiring. Obviously, then once you hire them, it's all about training them properly. And we did this very poorly last year. We were hiring for a position, and we did not train well, and they got confused and left. And they just said it's not a good fit, and we could, it was like, oh boy, yeah. So there's my little bit on the hiring. And again, I'm not saying pay is direct proportion to what you'll get out of them, but we find the more you pay, the better quality work you typically get.
Yep. Yeah, and most importantly, I think what you said in there too, Michael, is don't treat hiring as one of the things that you spend the least amount of time on, right? I mean, you want to value that. I mean, if it's going to be somebody out there doing what you want them to do so that you're producing a good, viable farm business, you definitely want to put the time and effort in that. So don't skate on just hiring anybody for your farm. If you need help, and you need it right away. I mean, there are times where you might have to accept people in to figure that out. But
Yeah.
in the most cases, if you're looking for somebody long-term, make sure that you put the time and effort into hiring the right people.
Absolutely, to your point, Troy. So we actually did two types of hiring. We did key role position, where we went after very specific people that we knew we wanted to bring in. And then we also did, like, we would literally do a massive rush in the fall for 6 or 8 or 10 people for fall harvesting. They knew coming in, it may be only 2 months, 3 months, but we were weeding them out. And usually in those 6 or 8, we'd be like, oh, there's a superstar that we are going to keep on however hard we, to try really hard to keep them on. So yeah, that's definitely something. I mean, like on our farm, we're going to have the port season or the flower season. We're going to have a bunch of people in for the flower season. At the end of that, we're going to weed them back out. Maybe 1 or 2 of them will stay. So yeah, it's going to be a little bit different. And we just kind of talked for, an hour and 20 minutes or so here. And I haven't told you what type of carrot to buy or what type of pepper to plant or when to plant it. It's all been business. That's how important the business side of your farm is.
Yes. Great. Well, thank you again, Michael, for this awesome presentation. I love these conversations with you. I know a lot of other people do out there. We want to thank you for everybody that attended and everybody that's going to listen to this later if they registered for all the series. Again, it's a 4-part series. Next week, we will have Chris Walker from Local Line. We'll dive into digital sales and marketing with you so you can see what it looks like to run your online stores. Local Line's doing some great stuff out there with that. They have an ebook out there, so we encourage you to listen in on that one. The following week is with a expert in the writing industry to help you think about thoughtful messaging with your customers, whether that's newsletters, blogs, social media posts, and everything. And then we'll close out the series first week of March with lean farming with myself. And so we built this the way for a reason. Thank you, Michael, for getting us into the business side and helping people get along. And again, we hope everybody has an awesome night, and we will see you next week.
Yeah, and some folks are asking, I don't really work with folks one-on-one anymore. We do that very, very limited. But if you go to growingfarmers.com, that's our main website. You can take an assessment there. There's some different trainings and courses that we've got. We've got some ebooks there and stuff. So a lot of great information. And again, we do have like a full bevy of different courses and stuff that people can go through if they want to. So there is obviously a lot of what we talked about. I mean, we gave the overview in an hour. That's a 6 or 8 hour course when we actually teach that whole thing. So, and someone is asking how old I am. I do have gray hair. That you might not believe that, but I do have gray hair. So that is how old I am. So.
All right, guys. Thank you so much, Michael. Thank you, everybody. Again, we will chat in anything that you asked for. I think there was a book name for the business model canvas. We'll get you that. So we have your email addresses. We'll make sure we get you any information. And thank you again for attending. We'll see you next week.